Welcome back to Funky Politics, the hardest hitting political show on the planet. Hey, I am DC, the host of Funky Politics, and that's right. This is the hardest hitting political show on the planet. We hit them from coast to coast with all the most, I'm telling you right now. And I want to get into something I think that is just amazing. We've had a lot of amazing news that's occurred. Now, when I say amazing, sometimes it can be grand and sometimes it can be very odd, but it's amazing nonetheless. Let's talk a little bit about the Rumble in Cleveland. Rumble in Cleveland won. That's right, folks. A presidential debate kicked off the other night, and oh, what a debate it was. I don't know if we can even consider that debate, or we can just consider it a street fight, because more than likely it was just a complete street fight. President was in the red corner, Vice President Biden was in the blue corner, and you make the decision on who you think won. All of us have got our own particulars about it. I don't think that, number one, the American public was served well with that particular exercise. Number one, it was not absolutely one where you got a lot of extra information so you can make your decision on who you want to support. But check this out. I want you to listen to a little clip here from the show. Not from that show, but from, well, it was a show. Check it out.
Said very strongly, more than a minute left in this
masks
segment.
Are not good. Then he changed his mind. He said masks good. I'm okay with masks.
I want to ask you both about one last subject, because your different approaches has even affected the way that you have campaigned. President Trump, you're holding large rallies with crowds packed together, thousands of people.
Outside.
Outside, yes, sir, agreed. Vice President Biden, you are holding much smaller events with...
Because nobody will show up.
People with...
Well, it's true. Nobody shows up to his rallies.
All right. In any case, why you holding the big rallies? Why you not? You goes first, sir.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
but are you not worried
done a
about
great job as a president, and I'll have 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
Are you not worried about the disease issue?
You know what? This guy, to me, he could really be a comedian. I mean, the president, sometimes it's really funny. And that little quip he said, nobody shows up to his rallies, was actually kind of funny. But it's serious, because now we just had news that hit us early morning hour that our president, that's right, he is still our president here, United States, 45, has contracted the coronavirus. He and the First Lady have contracted the coronavirus. I want to make sure that you all know, and I know, and that everybody in the world knows, that we are still going to pray for our president and his wife to recover, because no one wants to see him endangered or actually this become a lethal thing for him. But I believe that he will recover, and we're going to hope that he does recover. Oh, speaking of some other things in terms of recovering, the census. Oh, God. Census 2020. Are you counted? Just heard recently, federal courts have decided, and this is hot off of the presses, folks. The federal court out in California just decided, Judge O, she said they will have to extend the counting of citizens in this country through the end of October. So October 31st was going to be the 5th. They were going to wrap it up. The Census Bureau was talking about wrapping it up, but Judge O, she said no. October 31st, we will put a wrap on it after the 31st of October, but I want you to take a listen a little bit about what the census really means to some of us.
Beginning in March, the U.S. Census Bureau will invite households across the country to participate in the 2020 census. But what is the census? Simply put, the census is a head count of every person living in the United States. To be sure the government represents the people, the U.S. Constitution requires a population count every 10 years. Ever since 1790, the census has determined the number of seats each state receives in the U.S. House of Representatives. It is, and always has been, a cornerstone of our democracy.
Remember, it's a cornerstone of our democracy. You have to be counted, to make sure it does count. A lot of things I heard just recently that one person not being counted costs local governments about $16,000. That's locally here in Memphis and Shelby County. So think about if we missed 10,000 people, that's a lot of revenue that could go to pre-K, it could go to roads and bridges being rebuilt. It could go to a lot of extra funding that we need in our communities to make us safe. So do us a favor here on Funky Politics. Get yourself counted. It's a very easy process. Go online and do it, or mail your card in. But I'd go online to do it. That's what I'd do. Speaking of something else that Man, I tell you, our country is still we're still in turmoil. We don't have a race issue. We have a racism issue. Let's make sure that you know it's not a race issue. It's racism. Once racism is extracted from our communities, we will be able to make it then, but it's got to be extracted. You know, Daniel Cameron, who happens to be the attorney general for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, just recently came out and he said that they were not going to prosecute the other officers who killed Breonna Taylor. Say her name, Breonna Taylor. But here's a little clip from what's kind of going on in Louisville, Kentucky, and especially with the Kentucky Attorney General.
Tonight, in a highly unusual court filing, an unnamed grand juror in the Breonna Taylor case is asking a judge to be allowed to speak publicly so that the truth may prevail.
My client wants to make sure the truth gets out. My client wants to make sure that anything that happened in there becomes something of public knowledge to the extent it's legally allowed to.
Typically, grand jury proceedings are kept secret by law.
At this point, I don't think it's appropriate for us to release any information.
Last week, Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron cited an ongoing FBI civil rights investigation for why that information should not become public. But now he says he'll comply with the judge's order to release it by tomorrow. His office says we have no concerns with grand jurors sharing their thoughts on our presentation because we are confident in the case we presented. That case resulted in wanton endangerment charges for former Louisville officer Brent Hankison for firing bullets that ended up in a neighboring apartment. Hankison has pleaded not guilty. None of the officers involved was charged with causing Taylor's death during a botched drug raid in March. Cameron says the actions of two other officers were justified because Taylor's boyfriend shot at them first.
Wow, they were justified because her boyfriend shot at them first. All I'm going to say is, the Kentucky Attorney General, please do the right thing. Allow the courts to release the grand jury tapes. Let us hear for ourselves some of this characterization you say that's not true. A lot of us believe there's something else to this thing here. You got to do justice to this young lady's family. Breonna Taylor deserves it. Say her name, Breonna Taylor. Here we go. Oh, you know what? Enough of that. My guest today on Funky Politics is a young brother doing the damn thing. This guy he's working in one of the most important areas of science. Hey, this won't be a snooze fest, folks. Ammon Brooks is a Clinical Trials Project Mgr whose work takes him all over the country. This young brother is doing the work. He is trying to get a lot of us more involved in what we consider to be, or what the country, the science considers, is health studies. We have got to be a part of these studies. Clinical trials are important because you know what? How can you know if my blood pressure is decent in terms of the drugs that they're making and the other guy? All I'm going to say is stick around. It won't be a snooze fest. We're going to talk to Ammon Brooks. We call this brother Carlos. His mama called him Carlos. His auntie called him Carlos. Carlos Brookins will be right back with us here on Funky Politics in just a second.
Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, one and all, to the little show that we like to call Black Nerd Power BNP if you're nasty. I'm your host, Mr. Richard Douglas Jones, and with me, the co-hosts of Black Nerd Power, Mr. Marcus Seabury.
What's up, my nerd?
All nerd, please. And Ms. Kimber. What's happening, man?
Hi.
All right, first, here is the rage figure.
I love his helmet.
Talking about escapism and like, yo, I'm mad, but I'm tired. Like, is it okay that, like, if instead of going out to protest tonight, I want to sit and watch a movie? And I'm just like, hell yeah, it's fine.
A quote unquote woke romance that features a character that's not being like objectified for her body, that does not necessarily mean that book will not have sex in it.
And I think on that note, we're going to end the show.
KUDZUKIAN. Download the KUDZUKIAN app, available on Android and iOS.
And we are back with Funky Politics. I am DC, the host of this wonderful program, and my very special guest, Mr. Ammon Carlos Brooks. Welcome to the program, sir. How are you?
Wonderful, DC. Thank you for having me this morning.
Man, yes. So I'm going to go ahead and knock this. We're going to be personal here. Call me DC. I'm going to call you Carlos. Everybody else call you Carlos, brother. That's what I'm going to call you today. Is that cool?
Yes, sir.
Got you covered. Hey, I want our audience, number one, to know who you are, Carlos. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you began this journey, man, in science.
Wonderful. Well, I want to first start off by saying that I'm a proud Memphian. I'm a graduate of Middle College. It was on the campus of Middle College High School, a campus of Southwest Tennessee Community College, downtown Memphis off of Union. I graduated from the University of Arkansas Pine Bluff in 2006
Is that
with a
UAPB, Doc? Is that you?
UA.
Oh my goodness.
Let's
That's
see. I want to rip.
oh Lord, no, he didn't. No, he didn't, y'all. No, he
Golden
didn't.
line. The
Oh my
golden line. So
Golden
I brought
line.
some props since we want to get funky. I brought some props. I brought some air freshener in case it get too funky.
Wait a minute now. I don't
It's
have
time.
air freshener here in the studio, man. Come on now.
Look,
I
we're
like
gonna
that.
turn it up. We're gonna turn it up. And I'm also a proud member of Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. If there are
All
any
right.
Alpha watching.
All right. Yeah,
Um,
that's good. That's good to know, man. You know, somebody's got to be an alpha, Doc, and I'm glad that you won, brother.
listen, I understand, but I appreciate all Greeks.
We try, Doc. We try.
Yes, sir. But I graduated with a degree in biology pre-medicine,
Sure.
knowing that my initial goal of going to medical school and becoming a dermatologist had changed years earlier. And unfortunately, for a lot of people that major in biology or the medical sciences, if they don't have a plan to further their education and become trained clinicians, sometimes we get lost in the workforce and not quite sure how to leverage our education to land a great job. Um, I didn't have a plan for my new career goal. So while working as an assistant manager of a blood plasma center here in Memphis, which is an industry I will bring up later because it comes full circle with COVID right now, recruiters will contact me regarding job opportunities as a clinical research monitor. And this was a job and career path that I never heard of. A clinical research monitor ensures compliance with clinical trial protocols. They check clinical site activities. We make on site visits. Clinical research monitors assure the protection of the rights, safety, and well being of human subjects, which are the participants. We make certain that the scientific integrity of the data collected is protected and verified, and assure that the adverse events are correctly documented and reported. Now, when I say adverse events, in our industry, adverse events become side effects. So, so adverse events for us are events that we do not expect. There also are events that we do expect. So when you read the side effects of a drug,
Sure.
we have those adverse events or side effects that are common. Then we have some that are more risky that we call serious adverse events that are more harmful.
Well, and I want to stop you right there. So,
Sure.
and I'm one of those people who take I take my fair share of medicine, my fair share of medication, and that's legal stuff, right? But now, of course, on the documents that you get from the pharmacist, they've got this little trifold for you sometimes in it, and I have read on there the effects could cause sleepiness, could cause this or that. Now, are these the types of adverse effects we're talking about now that are published for you to get when you get your medication?
Yes, sir. And if you notice, when you look at side effects, you have some of the common that are not that serious, and then you have some that are more
Yes.
common. The most crucial, it would be death, or something that would lead to hospitalization. But these are things that we work on over a 10-year span, so we pretty much know the common side effects that you're going to be bombarded with when you take these drugs. Unfortunately, the only side effects that we don't know about, which come later, let's say a drug was approved this year, and 10 years down the line, you start having women who bear children with birth defects. Unfortunately, we do not know how to identify those issues because women of childbearing potential are not allowed to participate in clinical trials. So we would never have a
I
woman.
want you to stop right there.
Yes,
Are you saying to me right now that an 18-year-old, 19, 20-year, 25-year-old woman cannot participate in a clinical trial?
I'm not saying that a woman at that age cannot. What I'm saying is if she gets pregnant, she cannot participate.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
I want to make sure I
basically,
clear that up for our viewers.
contraception, but practice abstinence, or women who maybe cannot bear children. Because once a female participant becomes pregnant, she must end the study because we don't want the drug that we're researching to affect her offspring.
Well, I want to go somewhere else right quick with you, Carlos, and that is, there's a lot of us. This funky politics. So black folk, right over here, black folks. I mean, we don't like going to the doctor. So, and for whatever reason, we don't like going to the doctor. So, how do we get larger pools of us to participate in clinical trials. If we don't want to go to the doctor, why would I show up to your site and say, hey, here I am, DC, I'm ready to take whatever that is to help me with lower back pain or with a knee replacement, whatever that is.
Okay. And I understand because it's very common in our community.
Sure.
Number one, we suffer from a lack of awareness. We have major economic factors and a lack of communication. So although many of us may not like going to the doctor, I believe that one of the issues is having a primary care physician regularly going to a clinic. So basically, you have those of us who just don't like going to the doctor.
Sure.
But many of us who go to the doctor are not going to a primary care physician. We typically go to a clinic. And most of us who go to clinics, I believe, is reflective of economical issues. Primary care physicians are more likely to participate in clinical trials as an investigator outside of their private practice versus a clinic doctor, due to the clinic doctor having a larger pool of patients. They really don't have the time, right? Now, with regards to the lack of African American participation in clinical trials, we have historical mistrust, which we're going to discuss later. There's a past history of experimentation and other practices on Blacks that were unethical and brutal. And I want to paint a picture for you with this question. I have insurance, right?
Sure.
But due to my schedule, typically when I'm sick and I want to go see a primary care physician, they cannot see me without an appointment, and it may take a couple of weeks. So what do? I go to a clinic,
Sure.
right? Now, the clinicians within a clinic, they see so many patients, they don't have the time to invest in clinical research and likely wouldn't be able to refer a clinical study to one of their patients. But the great thing about a primary care physician is they have their own practice and they have their own pool of patients, especially if they're a specialist. If you have heart issues and you go see a cardiologist, even if they're not participating in a clinical trial, I'm sure one of their colleagues may be a principal investigator and they can refer you.
Well, so Carlos, so my thinking is right now, COVID really revealed to the world underserved communities, poor people, Black folk, poor white folks, poor Hispanics. It revealed to the world that we are not being able to access the health care that we really need, right? So would it not be smarter now that we're talking about how do we rethink our way forward in terms of healthcare disparities? Why wouldn't we put more money into, let's say, a clinic being able to maybe staff with another couple of doctors so we could take that burden off of all primary care physicians? Because you're right, a lot of folks go through clinics, man. That's where you get those real sick folks who typically are underserved. Doesn't that make sense to the healthcare field? To at
Yes,
least lobby for it, though. To at
I
least
agree.
lobby for it.
I agree, but I don't think we need to lobby for it. I think that there's potential for exploitation of the underserved community. Because
Oh, okay, I got you.
if you think about it,
Okay.
if I serve an underserved community as a doctor in a clinic, and I have all this a huge patient pool coming in, those patients are going to trust me, and likely, if I refer a clinical study and say, "Hey, it's a 3-year study, you can make $1,200," what do you think they're going to do? They're going to possibly participate.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of people that lobby for things in our community that exploit us, and that's why I said that I was going to mention blood plasma centers. Are you familiar with blood plasma
Oh
centers?
my goodness. I'm very familiar with him. When I was a
Yeah,
student at Tennessee State back in '85,
of
I
course.
used to visit one every other 3 days, and at some point, I would get in there every 2.5. It was a crazy thing because you're a college student, you're trying to get a little money on the side so you can eat away from home. And hey, plasma. Go ahead.
I wanna touch on this subject because I think it's very important. And I think it could be a great topic on a different discussion. So, blood plasma centers are typically in underserved communities. They're all around college campuses, right?
That's correct.
When you donate blood plasma in the United States, you can donate blood plasma twice a week within a 2-day period. So that's 2, 4, 8 times a month, right? In other countries, they regulate it. They regulate it more in other countries where you can only donate maybe once a week. The issue with blood plasma centers is that it's considered a donation. You're donating blood plasma. Blood plasma is liquid gold. It's so if your red blood cells is Kool-Aid mix, the plasma is the water. The water you can use water for so many other things versus the Kool-Aid mix, right? The problem is if it's a donation, why are they paying you? No one seems to think about this, but many of African Americans in underserved communities, they go donate maybe twice a week, and maybe for that week they may get $50 to $100. What most people don't understand is whenever you get paid to donate plasma, what they pay you is maybe 10% of what they make for each time you donate. So if they give you $30, that donation probably is worth $300.
Get out of here. No way. No way. No way.
And
There are
your
blood plasma centers set up all over this place, and they're getting, I think, they're $75 to $100. It's a what?
$20 billion industry. And that's why I left the industry to pursue what I'm in now. Because if I want our Black people to understand that your blood plasma is very important to your body. So if you're willing to take $30 or $40 to donate plasma when you're only getting 10% of the true value, you may as well participate in the clinical trial, especially if you have a terminal illness. Because the actual drug that they're researching can probably help you more than you giving away your blood plasma for $300 a month when they probably made $6,000 a month.
And I don't want to jump on any particular industry, but if it's true, it's just this funky politics, y'all. If it's true, it's just damn well true, right?
Do your research. Just look it up, do your research. Basically, my argument is the people that donate for blood plasma should get more. Basically,
should get
based on what is actually worth.
Well, you know, when you say our community, and let's talk about it, in poor communities around this country, you find certain businesses there. Plasma centers are one. You also find plenty of liquor stores, corner stores, and very few healthy options like food pantry. Well, not food, but places where you can go and actually get fruits and vegetables, right? Markets. But now another thing I've seen in our communities or on the periphery is these dialysis clinics. And I don't want to jump on that industry because Fresenius, I think, is one of the largest ones out of Germany. But am I wrong? Yeah, I don't understand. I don't remember them being as prevalent in our communities when I was growing up. And I'm 53, so I've been around a little bit. And I lived in South Memphis, North Memphis, and, of course, a part of East Memphis. So all of my life. And I don't remember seeing this high number of dialysis clinics. I mean, this is funky politics. I want our people out there to be educated and to know what's happening.
Well, one of the issues is just it's a reflection of the common illnesses we face in the Black community, kidney disease, kidney failure, and they are monopolizing. I live in Whitehaven, and I mean, there's a DaVita dialysis. I mean, on almost every block, like a Starbucks up north, and it's just I don't think they're necessarily exploiting our community. It's just that we're in such need. Now, when it comes to what type of care that people get, I'm not sure. I have reviewed some documentaries where there are some sketchy practices in these business models where patients who go to get dialysis are not being on the machine or getting the full treatment because it's almost like a meal. Like, cut in, we're going to give you as much as we can next. And some patients are not getting all of their medications as well. And that could be a different topic also.
Yeah, well, that's a whole, man. I want to get into something I know a lot of our folks want to talk about, and that's the Tuskegee study. Anybody who's been around, if you're older than maybe 25 or 30 or so, you've heard of the Tuskegee study, especially in a history class or in some history classes, not in all of them. Quite naturally, we're not taught everything that happened to us in the past. The president right now is talking about taking out some of the racial diversity platforms from the federal government. He does not want some things taught in our schools, but to teach things that did happen to us so we can reflect and think about how we don't let that happen again. I think it's very helpful. But I want you to break down this Tuskegee study and what it actually meant to those folks who were in this particular health study.
Sure. DC, what I'll do first is provide some facts, and then I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. Okay. So with the Tuskegee study, we're referring to the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, and this was conducted surprisingly, between 1932 and 1972. That's 40 years of unethical research on African American men. Now, initially, when these men were recruited for this study, it was only supposed to be 6 months, but it ended up spanning 40 years. The purpose of this study was to observe the natural history of untreated syphilis. Keep that in mind, untreated syphilis. So automatically, these men unknowingly participated in the trial where if they had syphilis, they were not going to be treated. The African American men in the study were only told that they were receiving free health care from the federal government to treat quote unquote bad blood. The term bad blood in those days was a term often used to describe syphilis and other conditions. So these men just thought that they had some issue. They didn't even know if they had syphilis, and they were going to get free treatment. Over 600 impoverished African American men participated in the trial, not knowing that they were diagnosed with syphilis. So even if they were diagnosed, they were never told, and they were never told that they were not receiving treatment. So they never received any treatment for the condition.
Now, can I stop you right there? Can I stop you right there? You're telling me that a study that was formed and founded and funded by our federal government allowed men to still participate in risky behaviors. I mean, basically, they're still having sex. Let's call it what it is. Some were still having sex, and you potentially have infected a woman and these children.
Correct. So not knowing definitely caused numerous participants to spread the syphilis, but also it resulted in over 83 deaths in the total of the 40 years. This significantly damaged the trust of African Americans towards public health efforts in the U.S., as many black men felt that the men were actually infected with syphilis versus already having the condition. And I want to say this again. The men initially joined the study because they felt like they had some type of blood issue. So when the doctors actually did testing and knew exactly what they had, they never told them that they had syphilis. So no one knows if all the patients were actually healthy and were infected with syphilis just to see the results. And that's like a conspiracy theory. And the biggest issue here, DC, is it's a major ethical issue because of a lack of informed consent. And so that's what the unethical practices lead back to: informed consent. When you participate in a clinical trial, you have the right to know exactly what you are getting involved in. You have the right to know the pros and cons of the therapy, as well as know the potential side effects and the more severe adverse side effects that could possibly cause you to lose your life. And they were not given that opportunity, and this went along for 40 years.
So once it was over in 1972, I'm sure the Congress and a lot of the talking heads got together. Were any of these families compensated, or have they been followed since then to see if there's a longer history of syphilis in these families?
I do believe that there's been some awards. I was reading that I do recall an award of up to about $10 million, and it probably was spread amongst the family.
Sure.
Now this is something else I forgot to mention. Syphilis can be treated by penicillin, and penicillin was around during this study. So although they had a cure for syphilis, they still didn't give it to the men.
What are the effects of syphilis? I mean, for those out there who don't know, because I have no clue what it is that happened to you. I mean, I don't know.
Well, all I know is that syphilis is a treatable sexually transmitted disease. I know that typically for those who are infected or who contract syphilis, men or women can experience discharges. They can experience certain type of rashes, etc., and also pain during urination. Those are just some key things. I'm not quite sure if there are people with syphilis that may be asymptomatic, like people with COVID, because if you could be asymptomatic with no symptoms, you definitely could spread it all around.
Wow. And of course, as you said, 83 men eventually succumbed to this because either of lack of treatment or just through, man, that's
It can attack your bloodstream.
yeah.
It can cause heart conditions. This is untreated. So a lot of these things are treatable, but once they go too long untreated, they can cause other conditions.
Before we go to break, I want to talk about one other subject out there, and I guess what I'm doing, I'm building the case for us to begin to trust, right? Because you can't build the trust with people until you correct some of the wrongs that were in the past, and that's what I'm trying to do for our listeners and our viewers right now, because I think it's vitally important that you know about what happened. Another young lady, Henrietta Lacks. I mean, this is another case study right here. Can we talk about that right before we go to break?
Sure. I'll just speak about it briefly. So,
Sure.
Henrietta Lacks was an African American woman whose cancer cells are the source of some cells called HeLa cells. That's HeLa, and that's a cell line. So, HeLa cells are the first immortalized human cells, which means that they can be reproduced indefinitely under specific conditions. These cells still provide valuable medical data in present day. These cells were cultured from Henrietta from a tumor biopsy during her treatment for cervical cancer in 1951, which she actually succumbed to the same year. So the same year that they actually took the biopsy from the tumor and made a culture and replicated her cells, she also died that year. Now, ironically, her family was not made aware of the cell line's existence until 1975. So they unknowingly took her cells and replicated them in 1951, but her family did not find out until 1975. And after years of protest, they now have minimal control over access to her genetic data. So DC, this is another case of lack of informed consent, because neither Henrietta Lacks nor her family gave her physicians permission to harvest her cells. They just did it unknowingly. No consent. Didn't ask her, did it, replicated it, been using it for years, and they still use it.
So is a clinical trial project manager director working with lead investigators, do you see why there's a possibility some of us don't trust the man, so to speak?
It's totally understood, and those in power in research and the government, they understand too. Unfortunately, it took COVID-19 to really look at it and really push it, because they really need the African American demographic to show up to participate in these COVID-19 clinical trials, not just for their benefit, but for our benefit.
For our benefit as well.
Yeah,
Hold that thought. Hold that. I want to come back because we got some more heavy hitting to do. We got some more weighty issues to talk about. We'll be right back with more of our good friend Carlos Brookins right here on Funky Politics.
Hello and welcome to R&R on Sports. We are pleased to have with us today Mike Wallace, who is the Grind City Media Senior Editor. Mike, welcome to R&R on Sports.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, man, and I hope you guys are safe and pushing through this, man. Thanks a lot. It's been far too long. I'm glad we're finally able to do this.
Absolutely. But Howard, you got to put some respect on this brother's name. Now, he used to do the Heat Index for the Miami Heat. This brother went to the championship 4 times in a row. Now, he wasn't on the court actually before the game and after the game, but he went to the championship 4 times in a row with the Miami Heat. What's up, my brother Mike?
Hey, what's going on, man?
KUDZUKIAN. Check out all your KUDZUKIAN favorites now. Download the KUDZUKIAN app, available on Android and iOS.
And we are back with Funky Politics. I am DC, host of this wonderful program, and we have Ammon Carlos Brookins on the show today, a clinical trial project manager. I'm going to call him by his whole government name, Ammon Carlos Brooks, but then we're going to break it down to what his auntie called him, Carlos. Man, you know what? We have you kind of just given me a major education. I know you've given our listeners and our viewers a major education. Henrietta Lacks, the Tuskegee experiment. I still want to build a case that we become eventual participants in the COVID-19 trials. And I want to get into that. I want to get into that very heavily. But, you know, you've done a lot of this work so far. Before I go there, I want to talk about how do we get our young men and women of color to understand that they can become a part of the healthcare industry, not necessarily to be a doctor or a nurse or a physical therapist, but clinical trials. I mean, there's a lot of other positions out there. So is the STEM education working for your side of the business as well?
There's a lack of African American and other minorities such as Spanish um, brothers and sisters, as well as American Indian as well. So I believe we do a great job putting emphasis on the younger generation pursuing STEM, but I believe that we still face limited access to quality education, discrimination in recruitment and promotion. This leads to a lack of ethnic and racial diversity. So we as parents or mentors, I believe we should help the young generation focus more on the actual field of interest and not push them to focus on a specific job. Schools that don't offer advanced courses, which relates to a lack of quality education. So for those schools, such as I went to a UAPB, all only option that I had was biology pre-med, but a bigger school probably had all different types of biology that were accessible for your major. So for those schools that don't offer advanced courses, I believe they should partner with larger universities, allowing students to access these courses. And for the companies, which is really a big issue as well, companies should be required to recruit from all universities. And if they do not have the capacity to visit all schools, the schools that they visit should be required to invite students from the surrounding schools.
That sounds like one of the that's a commercial. I think we need to take that and we need to make sure that those universities, especially our HBCUs, right? There is no doubt. We know that most of our HBCUs are dealing with limited funds. Been dealing with limited funds since they were founded. We're not going to get into that, and that's a whole nother show. But there are typically other larger universities in the same cities with these HBCUs that could very well partner. And I think there are some partnerships that are going on right now, but I agree with you, especially when you have a limited degree offering in some of the HBCUs, that larger university ought to make sure that there's a partnership. And I think it would bode well, especially for our black and brown children.
Yes, and let me stress again. I believe that we should stop pushing the younger generation for a specific job. It'd be wonderful if every young black man and young black lady was a doctor or astronaut. But think about all of the supporting cast to get someone to the moon. Think about all the supporting cast that supports that doctor. Very important roles. Just even the president of the United States has a supporting cast of people. And so would you push a young man to be the president, or just push the young man to study law or economics or study uh, uh, policy or
I got you. Yeah, sure.
right. So if you push the actual field, it allows that person to actually do the research and say, where do I fit in?
Sure.
I may not want to be a doctor, but I love science, but I love medicine. And that's what happened to me. So we focus on the field and not the specific job. I think we'll see more youngsters actually find what they're interested in instead of realizing they wasted a lot of time and now they're lost.
Because I wanted to be this or I wanted to be that, and I got into part of that, and it didn't quite feel the same, and I couldn't really meet the criteria.
And
And
maybe you
sometimes,
put 5 or 6 years of your life
yeah, there
and
you
you're
go.
behind. And now you're behind. And maybe 6 years later, you discover a field that's always existed, but you never took the time to even look it up because you've been focused on being something that you knew you didn't want to be.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. And I want to. You just mentioned the president a minute ago, and we mentioned COVID-19 earlier in the show, and we mentioned the president earlier in the opening. But the president calls COVID-19 a Chinese virus. So no matter where the origins of this virus originated from, I want to make sure that the public, number one, can count on our scientists approving what's the safest and the most thoroughly tested vaccine for the American people. I mean, that's what matters to me. In your research, and I think you follow this probably as well as anybody, and you've probably been a part of a lot of this, is that not what the overarching goal is for the scientific community, to make sure that we produce the absolute best tested piece, the best, the most thorough and the safest, not only for the American public, but for the world? Because this is not going to be a vaccine just for Americans. It's going to be for the world, correct?
Yes, sir. So I'm not a COVID-19 expert,
Sure.
but I will suggest that our government will approve the safest vaccine based on the U.S. projected timeline of 12 to 18 months. That's our goal, 12 to 18 months.
So now that's the U.S. projected timeline, 12 to 18 months. So
So-
one that's actually produced within 6 months. And I do not want to scare the public, but one that's produced in 6 months. And you got people, especially some of the anti-vaxxers, who will say, I'm not going to take it anyway. And a lot of the anti-vaxxers don't want their children vaccinated, and that's their prerogative. But now when you want them in a public school, then that's not your prerogative anymore, right?
Correct.
So with this, that leads me to believe that 6 months, 5 months, you got something that's ready November 3rd and November 5th. I'm not so sure about that. Have we been working on this a whole year already, Carlos?
Not at all. Just think it's likely been approximately 7 to 8 months since the pandemic started.
Sure.
And I want to share some key information about clinical trials and vaccine trials.
Okay.
Clinical trials have 4 phases, and a typical vaccine trial takes actually 10 years. And the record for a clinical trial vaccine was actually 4 years, and that was for the mumps. So the current process is highly expedited, meaning all hands on deck. And it looks like the trend for approval is at phase 3, meaning we're going to approve it at phase 3 and then continue to research afterwards to complete the phase 4 trial with a larger research population. And I think Russia set the trend on that. You know, when Russia said they completed a phase 3 trial, the people who govern the U.S. stated, oh, that's not right. They need to complete phase 4. But if you think about our history with Russia, Russia and the United States are like those two friends that's always in competition with each other. They always, you know, if you got a new pair of shoes, who's going to get the pair of shoes first?
That's right.
So typically, the United States gets afraid anytime Russia's going to do anything first. So all of a sudden now, the United States government is okay with possibly approving the vaccine at phase 3, then continuing the research after the fact. So those are things for people to think about. But also, as African Americans, we have to understand now, due to federal regulations and ethical laws, when it comes to informed consent and participation in clinical trials, they're governed for all Americans, meaning our white brothers and sisters, Asian brothers and sisters, we all are under the same ethical responsibilities. So I don't want you guys to think that if you participate in the trial, that if you saw a Caucasian participant, that you're going to be treated differently because you all are governed under the same federal code of regulations.
So and let's stay right there right quick, because I want to kind of get this out in the open here. If we have clinical trials and this vaccine piece, you say it's at a phase 3 now, and I'd say let's just give it 8 months. Let's say it's 8 months in. Again, how am I as a concerned citizen who thinks that I know I don't want to get the COVID, right? And I know I don't want my loved ones or friends or anybody to get the COVID, but how am I supposed to juxtapose it and say, okay, I'll go ahead and try this? It's going to take a lot more convincing, and I think from leadership, and I'm talking from the very top to the middle down to the very bottom, to convince us that this thing is safe.
Well, let me say this. The average drug takes about 10 years from discovery to approval, if it's approved by the FDA within the United States. And that can cost a company approximately $1 billion. So let's look at the pandemic and COVID-19. This is a world issue.
Sure.
So that means that this is not one company working on this. This is the whole world. So when I mentioned earlier, all hands on deck, if the typical budget for a drug is $1 billion, I would imagine this is a 24-hour task where people are working 24/7. There's probably an unlimited budget. So it's easy to expedite something that takes that long and bring it to occur within maybe a year's time to 18 months based on how much money or funds you have to invest in it. Meaning people are working more hours, people are doing more promoting and recruiting. And when there's a lack of funds, things take longer. But when you have unlimited funds, you can expedite a process.
Well, China now and Russia, they lay claim to having developed a vaccine already. I think I just heard recently where President Putin of Russia is contemplating being administered the vaccine. Again, I want that versus taking the vaccine versus these other folks out there who are saying, let's look at this from a herd mentality point of view in terms of exposure. How do we fight this? That they've got something, then you got one set saying if everybody gets it, we'll be okay. That's that herd mentality piece. And then you got the other say, let's hold on, there's a vaccine on the way that we are helping develop from an American standpoint.
Okay. The first thing I want to say is that the approval of this vaccine is going to be based on both science and politics. And politics is going to play a major role because politics and laws are the laws and regulations. That's what regulates the research and medical industry.
Sure.
So it's going to be politics and science as a joint task. But first, let me say that the government cannot force Americans to take the new COVID vaccine once approved. But lawmakers could create mandates that impose consequences for those that are not vaccinated. So it could possibly be a catch-22. So I can't make you take the vaccine, but if you don't take the vaccine, maybe you don't get this government funding, or maybe we maybe can we can remove you from health insurance or not approve you for certain health insurance.
It's kind of like children going to school, right? Remember, you got to be vaccinated. You got to have your shot record to be enrolled in a public school. But now,
Correct.
if you say that for the public school, I think the only way that you can make it an equitable situation is those who attend private academies as well. And I don't know that it's not. I don't know that because I didn't go to a private academy, but I did go to a public school, and we had to be vaccinated. So now, if you made it across the board, I think that they could hold that over, and I think that's probably what's going to happen. Those who are being admitted into hospitals in order to get to stay, you may have to be inoculated with this COVID-19 vaccine.
Or your employer could
Sure.
require, especially if you work in a medical environment.
I hadn't thought about that. Oh my goodness. So there's a way to pressure one to be able to take this COVID-19 vaccine.
Yes, sir. Definitely. And more than likely, the federal government is going to put it in the hands of state law.
Yeah.
I think states are going to control that for their particular states.
Well, and I want you to reemphasize to our communities how important it is for those of us who are battling heart disease, those of us who are battling kidney disease, and those of us who will just absolutely not go and get a prostate check for whatever reason. We just will not go and get go to a urologist. Reemphasize to us how important it is, not only for those of us who are especially black men, to do the checkups, to make sure that you are available to be considered for a study, a clinical trial study, right? I need that reassurance. I need you to tell me, how do we do that? How do we get those that look like me and you to do that? How do we get those folks to go to the doctor as well? How do we get more of our men to go to the doctor?
Well, the first thing I want to say is in our community, we have a lot of fear of the unknown. And we also have a lot of fears based on the rumor mill. We don't do our research. And so when you fear the unknown, you can leverage that by doing your research and asking questions. When I was thinking about this podcast, I was thinking about a picnic that I went to a couple of months ago, and we in our community, we always wonder who made the potato salad.
That's right.
And we'll see the potato salad. We will ask who cooked this food before we eat it, but we don't typically ask questions about medications that we take. We don't typically think about this medicine that I'm taking, where there are African Americans like me participating in these trials. Is my ethnicity or our genetics, are we represented in the creation of this drug or this compound? So we have to lose that fear. We actually need to care. A lot of us believe that as long as we don't know we're sick, we're not sick. And a lot of us believe that once we find out that we're ill, that we're going to die immediately after finding out that we're ill, when it's not that you're dying after finding out. It's just that by the time you finally went to the doctor because you can't breathe or that you're having stomach issues, you find out that you actually have been dealing with pancreatic cancer for the past 4 years. Now you're stage 4. Had you had gone when you first felt that pain, your mortality rate could have possibly increased. What I would like to do is share with you some information that I read from a recent article, and it's from an organization called the ACRP. That stands for Association of Clinical Research Professionals. Now, this excerpt is per Jim Cremidas, who is the director of the ACRP. And I think it brings home both aspects, meaning we need more ethnic communities in clinical research, but also we need more ethnic communities working in the medical field. Per Jim Cremidas, the diversity of the importance of diversity of patients in clinical studies and clinical workers cannot be overlooked. Increasing the number of minority clinical workers will help meet the growing need for additional healthcare workers in the United States. It will also make those who conduct the trials more reflective of the broader U.S. population. And if that occurs, it will ultimately lead to ensuring the patients in clinical trials will be more representative of the U.S. population. Building more staffs will help. More diverse staffs will help to build the trust needed to conduct clinical trials that are more representative of our communities, resulting in more equitable health outcomes and employment opportunities. People tend to trust and understand other people who share the same background and culture. Less than 20% of clinical trial participants are from Black and Hispanic communities. At the same time, African Americans and Hispanics and Native Americans make up approximately 1/3 of the U.S. population. In the ongoing global pandemic, this population is about 2.6 times more likely to get coronavirus than white and non-Hispanic persons. So just think about what this director of the Association for Clinical Research Professionals just said, that he sees a correlation between a lack of ethnic or Blacks or African Americans in the research field and medical field, and he sees a correlation between a lack of African Americans in research or going to the doctor.
Well, and I want to stay right there. So I was at one time, and this is something personal, I was prescribed lisinopril. And then I read somewhere, I don't know what medical publication, that lisinopril was one of those drugs, and that's for heart disease, or for for those of us who from the old country call it heart trouble. And it had a deleterious effect on Black men in the study and this was after it went to market, of course. And so apparently what that says to me is that they didn't have enough Black men in the initial clinical trial study. Is that right?
Correct. May I ask what was one of the effects? Was it muscle pain?
Muscle pain. It also had issues. It dealt with issues of sexual potency. That was one of the other issues, and there was a couple other things like a rash, I think, was one of those other things. So men have got to get involved with this. Black men have got to go to these clinical trials because we're being prescribed this stuff, and then we find out down the road it's not working for us, Carlos. It's not working. I had to get off of that junk, man. I had to get off of it.
And it didn't take you long to feel those negative
No,
effects.
not at all. Not at all. And this was a number of years ago when I started taking it, and I said, wait, I'm not feeling really good about this. And of course, my doctor, my primary care physician, actually prescribed me another brand of the medication, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is what occurred. And so I guess that leads again to me saying, brothers and sisters, we've got to be a part of what they're going to eventually give us. It's like, hey, don't you want to know what's in your cake? Don't you? The cake looks great, but all of us, just like you said earlier, we want to know, well, who made that potato salad? You don't ever want to say, well, baby, what kind of, are you on blood pressure medication? Are you on what they got you on? And how many milligrams you on? We sit around and talk about every damn thing else. Oh, Carlos, we talk about every damn thing else under the sun. Don't make no damn sense in the world. But we don't want to talk about our health issues with one another.
It's too late.
It's like talking out. It's like growing up. But don't you talk outside the house? I'm not talking outside the house, Mom. I'm just asking a question about what I saw. Right.
Right. And again, the fear is the unknown. You're afraid because you don't take the time to get the knowledge. If you get the knowledge, it's almost like buying a home. I always tell people, be an educated buyer.
Sure.
Know what you're purchasing. Know what you're taking. Know what you're eating. We're so interested in everything else, but the people responsible for the things that we purchase and the things that we buy, especially the things we put in our body, are hoping to make us well.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, we've had a hell of a show here with you today. Carlos, man, you were all that I thought you were going to be. You laid it out. I wanted to build the case for us to be a part of this, and I think that's how we ended it. But I also want to make sure that if you got any closing thoughts out there, you want to throw one more pitch at somebody. You want to try to heave and try to make one more touchdown. This is your opportunity, man. Give us a word.
Well, let me just say that I want the listeners to think about themselves, think about their children, think about your fellow brothers and sisters, and just think about our nation as a whole. You owe it to yourself. Invest, you hear the term invest in yourself. Invest in yourself by getting the knowledge. Lose the fear. Go to the doctor. If you have any type of terminal illness, ask your primary care physician or even ask the clinician at a clinic. Can they refer a clinical trial or any principal investigator for a clinical trial based on the illness that you're dealing with, whether it's heart disease, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's insomnia. Try to do some research to see if there's anything out there. But also, when it comes to this COVID, if you're anti-vaxxer or if you believe it's a hoax, you still owe it to everyone to practice social distancing, wear a mask. If you believe that you're ill, go get a test. Because I know people that have died from it, and I know people that are dealing with it now. So for me, it is real, and I don't want you to learn the hard way. If our own president is saying that he's contracted it, that means that any one of us can contract it as well. I do want to share with you two websites. Okay,
please do.
So the first website is for CNS Healthcare here in Memphis. They're the first clinical site here in the city to actually have a COVID-19 study. They're currently conducting one now. That's www.cnshealthcare.com. That's www.cnshealthcare.com. And then there's also clinicaltrials.gov. This is a website that allows you to look up all the current and past clinical trials conducted in the United States of America and how to reach out to people if you're interested in participating. That's www.clinicaltrials.gov. That's clinicaltrials.gov.
Man, I tell you. Brother Carlos, thanks for laying it down for us, Doc. Man, I'll get you back on here again as soon as I can. Maybe when the president recovers, we'll talk about maybe he'll share with us some of the issues that he went through, with this COVID-19 piece, because he, of course, and the First Lady have contracted COVID-19. And, of course, I still will be praying for this president and wishing him well in his recovery, him and his wife. So, man, thanks again for being on Funky Politics. I'll be right back with some closing thoughts.
Thank you, DC.
KUDZUKIAN.
So we're talking about actual harm against actual people.
Different episodes, you come up with a more surprising thing.
You just taking baby steps, talking about escapism and like, yo, I'm mad, but I'm tired.
Hello. It is a privilege and an honor to join you for this special ceremony.
I can't tell you how privileged and pleased I am to be a part of the most critical conversation of 2020.
Sickle cell disease from birth to childhood up. So thank you for joining us.
KUDZUKIAN. Check out all your KUDZUKIAN favorites now. Download the KUDZUKIAN app, available on Android and iOS.
Hey, I am DC, and we are back with you. Just got a couple of closing thoughts. I want to make sure that I send a shout out to Ammon Brookins for showing up and showing out for us today. This young brother is doing the damn thing, y'all. He is a project manager working with clinical trials, and if he's not inspiring to you to talk to your son or your daughter about the possibility of looking at another part of the healthcare field and say, look, I think I can do what that brother's talking about doing, I don't know who he is, right? And so I want a special shout out to him. I know his family, know his uncle and his aunt, good people. Whitehaven just turned them out down there. Lord have mercy, the city of Whitehaven, Tennessee. But anyway, another thing, let's make sure we also do our part. Social distancing, wearing that mask, washing those hands 10, 12 times, 15 times a day if you have to do it, guys. We've got to do what we've got to do to kind of keep this virus down. I think we're getting our numbers down, but in some parts of the country, the numbers are going back up. But let's stay prayed up. Let's pray for our president that he recovers, he and his first lady recover, and that's just what Christians and that's what people of good thoughts ought to do anyway. It doesn't matter his style of politics. I am sending up positive thoughts for the President of the United States. And again, well, you've had it here from the very hostess of the mostest, DC, right here on Funky Politics. We'll see you next time.